Imagine a world where the monsters aren't just vampires, but the scars of history, guilt, and identity tearing at your soul. Ryan Coogler's Sinners isn't just a horror film. It's a mirror to our mental health struggles. Set in 1932 Mississippi, where trauma, resilience, and the blues collide.
Hey, brother. Be careful. I will.
As a licensed professional counselor, I'm diving into how this film speaks to our minds and hearts. Hey everyone, thanks for joining Therapy Scenes today. My name is John Cordray and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and today I am reacting to the movie Sinners. There's so much mental health themes here, I cannot wait to talk about it. My channel blends a combination of pulp culture, of TV shows and movies, and I talk about how different scenes have different mental health themes, and I love how pop culture and mental health collide. If you enjoy TV and movies and mental health, this is a place for you. Let's start with the heaviest theme of generational trauma. Sinners is set in the Jim Crow era in Mississippi.
You twins?
Nah, we cousins.
Segregation and plantation exploitation creates a backdrop of collective pain. The twin brothers Smoke and Stack, which is kind of funny, Smokestack, and their cousin Sammy carry this history into their bones. The juke joint that they open sits on a former killing floor where black people were murdered. Its bloodstains a literal scar on the past. Smoke especially sees himself as unredeemable for his violent past as a soldier and a gangster, and a guilt that's tied to surviving a world that dehumanizes him.
Take me in your eyes.
In counseling, generational trauma is when pain like racism or abuse passes through the families from generation to generation, and it really shapes how we think and how we feel. Smoke's hypervigilance and Sammy's defiance of his preacher father scream trauma responses. The vampires? Well, they're a metaphor for oppression that leeches away at freedom. And one person on X posted that it's offering false power without healing. And I think that's such a descriptive way of talking about this. False power without effective healing. And that is a theme that's going to carry out through Sinners.
What the hell going on?
As an LPC, I would use trauma-informed care to help Smoke process this. Maybe through narrative therapy to reframe his story, to think about the experiences that he had in war and as a gangster and what he did to other human beings would help him process that.
This gift can bring fame and fortune.
So this theme right here, this is therapy in motion. It's community. It's a community reclaiming joy despite the pain. It's a collective experience that we're having fun and dancing and celebrating life. That is healing.
Listen here, this ain't no house party.
But Smoke's guilt, it shows trauma that's lingering grip on him, which we'll explore a little bit later. Next is the identity conflicts. Sinners ask, who are you when society labels you a sinner? Smoke and Stack, World War I vets turned gangsters, they wrestle with their roles as protectors versus killers. Smoke sees himself as damned, while Stack schemes for control. Their cousin Sammy, nicknamed Preacher Boy, rejects his father's religious path for blues music, choosing authenticity over expectation. Wow, there are a lot of themes to unpack here. We've got these main characters of Smoke and Stack and Sammy, and they're each have their own struggles, their own battles, but at the same time, they struggle with this generational trauma. It's a collective trauma that they're each experiencing at different stages of their journey. And we see that played out here in Sinners. Coogler himself said that this movie is about identity. It's about how people see themselves, with Smoke viewing Sammy singing as redemptive, but his own actions as sinful. He's looking at someone else but judging himself. That is guilt. And that is internal critic at its best. In my practice, I see clients who get stuck in this identity versus role confusion stage. Identity versus role confusion is where societal pressures like racism in 1932 clash with self-concept, causing anxiety. These two tensions, what's going on in the world around them and then what's going around inside themselves, they clash. Sammy's defiance here is a healthy push for autonomy, but Smoke's self-loathing risks depression. So on one hand, Sammy is expressing himself outwardly, where Smoke is starting to condemn himself internally. These are two different people on two different paths, reacting in two totally different ways. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, could help Smoke challenge his negative self-beliefs, like he's unredeemable. He looks at his past, he looks at what he has done, and he believes that there is something innately wrong with him. And that's the internal critic. That's where the depression starts to whisper and yell in your ear to say that you are guilty and you are not redeemable. That is where Smoke is. The film's vampires, they promise eternal life. They tempt the characters to lose their identity.
You don't need no saving.
Yes, you do.
Which mirrors real world pressures to conform. You could either develop your own self-identity with your own self-values and your self-worth, or you can conform to the world, and it's tempting for them. The vampires are promising something that maybe they would like to have.
Your way out.
But internally, they know that they would have to get rid of their own identity. And that's that internal struggle that this movie does such a great job bringing out. Sammy's choice to play the blues is a rebellion and self-discovery. For Smoke, though, identity is a heavier burden for him. It's tied to this next theme that we'll talk about, and that is coping mechanisms. Different people have different ways of coping with trauma and abuse and anxiety and depression. In Sinners, the characters face racism. They face poverty. They face the vampires, and turning to music and alcohol and religion and violence to survive, to cope. And we'll see that there are different characters that choose different paths. Delta Sim is an interesting character. He drinks to escape Jim Crow's living nightmares. It's a very common coping mechanism for many people when they're depressed, when they feel oppressed. They turn to other things to cope, to numb. And alcohol is a favorite choice of so many people. The problem is you cannot escape depression, and alcohol itself is a depressant. It just makes it worse. And then you're stuck. And then alcoholism's got you right where it wants you, and then you become addicted, and then it wears at your body. And so when people turn to maladaptive coping, like drinking or drugs, it's actually destroying themselves inside out. Sammy's blues music, however, is a creative outlet, but it attracts the vampires, showing even healthy coping can have risk. Yes. So the music brought on the vampires, and we know the vampires are their enemies, and they are out to get them. Even though Sammy is expressing himself in a very healthy way of coping with racism and his own traumas, that brings and invites the vampires into his life. Somebody on X talked about how the characters really relied on music and alcohol and violence for their PTSD, but without therapy. And I think that fits very, very good here. Back in the 1930s, there wasn't really anything like therapy or counseling. PTSD wasn't developed until years later. And people just had to kind of cope on their own and figure it out for themselves. And some people chose healthy ways of coping and others chose unhealthy ways of coping. As a counselor, I talk a lot about how adaptive coping, like mindfulness or journaling, is the most healthiest that you can do versus the maladapting, like the drugs and the alcohol that we see. Somebody has two different options here, or two different paths that they can take. One is the healthy coping and working on their emotions and talking to a therapist. The other is to reject others, to isolate, to drink, to do drugs, to escape, to bury. And that never helps. It might feel like it does in the moment, but in the long-term sustainability, it does not. It will destroy you. Learn how to have the creative outlets to cope with the trauma in your own life. Instead of drinking, let's talk about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and we'll replace the drinking the alcohols with something else that's more healthier to cope. The tools like mindfulness and deep breathing and journaling and just talking through and working on how their thoughts can influence their emotions and their behavior. It could be a very effective tool when you're struggling with depression and anxiety. The movie Sinners shows how systematic barriers, a much broader, much bigger trauma, an entire people and an entire race. It shows how the systemic barriers, like having no therapist in 1932 Mississippi, force a reliance on what's available around them, kind of their own, what do you want to do, how you want to do it. But it's a disparity that's still real even today. Even though there's a lot of help and a lot of therapists and a lot of counselors that you can go and get help and resources for, many people choose not to get the counseling that's right there in front of them. They choose other unhealthy alternatives and it keeps them stuck. Music saves Sammy, but Delta Sims' escape through whiskey traps him. Coping ties to our next theme here, which is a community's role in healing. Community is a lifeline for sinners, and community could be a lifeline for yourself if you're struggling with mental health issues. The juke joint is a haven where people dance, they laugh, they celebrate, they resist oppression. It's like it's a group therapy session. Can you imagine being in a group therapy session and you're dancing, you're laughing, you're celebrating? Wow, that'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? That's what's happening here at the juke joint. They share a collective trauma, and yet they also share a collective healing in the music that they listen to, the dancing that they're doing, the laughing, the celebrating. It's not that they are escaping, but it's a joy in the midst of the pain. Common Sense Media calls it community and freedom within. I love that. It's a place of joy despite Jim Crow. But isolation, like Smoke's estrangement from his wife Annie or Stack's abandonment of Mary, deepens the pain. Systemic racism isolates them even further, which limits the safe spaces for them. And in counseling, social support is a buffer against depression. It's a way to bring together humanity in that shared experiences, the connections that it makes. The juke joint's communal energy here is a reminder that you're not alone. Even though there's evil all around, there's depression all around, there's oppression all around, the juke joint is a place where people can come together and they know they are not alone. Smoke's isolation, though, it risks mental health crisis as he lacks that connection. When you isolate yourself and you're not connected, it deepens the depression and it makes it worse and isolates you even more. And then you feel like you're all alone. Sinners shows community as both a healer and a target, with the vampires attacking the juke joint to destroy its strength. The vampires don't want community, and there's a reason for that. There is power in community. There is healing in community. And the vampires wanted to destroy that, and they wanted the people to depend on them. Juke joint is hope, but isolation pulls Smoke apart, leading to our final theme in Sinners. PTSD and survival's guilt. Smoke and Stack, they were in World War I, and they're veterans and they're ex-gangsters. They show PTSD-like symptoms, hypervigilance, guilt, and avoidance. Smoke's beliefs that he's unredeemable, yeah, that screams survival's guilt. While Sammy returns to church bloodied, he's clutching onto that broken guitar, and it suggests that trauma from the vampire attacks and societal pressures. Pretty amazing scene. In my practice, when I help people with PTSD, it's about working with their intrusive memories and their hyperarousal. It's trauma-focused CBT, and it can be treated through EMDR therapy. Smoke needs this to fight his past, not just the vampires. Sinners reminds us that trauma lingers, but healing is possible through support and community. What did you think about the vampires? What did you think about Smoke and Stack and Sammy? What did you think about the other characters and the generational trauma, the Jim Crow laws and what was going on in Mississippi? What did you think about how there wasn't really any counseling or formal counseling available, but they used community as a way of healing and coping? Trauma, whether it's individual or generational, is real. It is hard. It is deep. It can linger. But it's the important part here is that healing is possible. We can work through just about anything with others in community. And even though the characters back in the 1930s didn't have counselors or therapists, we do today. There are lots of resources that you can take advantage of. And I want to encourage you, if you're struggling with trauma or really with any mental health illness, reach out for help. Reach out to your community and also reach out to a therapist. Work through that. It is possible. Healing for you is possible. And I want you to experience that freedom that the characters in Sinners experienced. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. What did you think of Sinners? I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on that. You know, it is a horror film, so there's a lot of entertainment there. But as a therapist, I look at Sinners and I see all these different layers and themes of mental health, from generational trauma to individual battles. And that is what I love about Sinners. So drop a comment. I want to know. I want to hear from you. What did you think? What are some of the thoughts that you have? And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel here. I talk about TV, I talk about movie scenes, and I bring out the mental health issues that are relevant for today. Take care, everybody. Until next time, keep moving forward, and we'll see you at the next Therapy Scenes video.
Is you?
Of course, it's me. Open the door.
That ain't your brother.